Okay, Chris, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, Jeff. Great to catch up.
It's great to have you on the show because we're going to cover a topic I've never covered before. We know that the war for talent has not been this bad for many, many years, and we're always looking for creative, innovative ways to source talent and places to find people. You are an expert on a very interesting aspect, which is veterans. You're a veteran yourself, and you've thought a lot about this topic of how to recruit them, how to find them, what kind of roles, etc. So for the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to really drill into that. Sound good?
Let's do it.
Why don't we start at a very high level, which is, what are some of the myths or misconceptions that you think, a lot of employers and executives have about hiring vets?
There's a few out there. Number one is that every veteran has PTSD or some sort of brain injury.
Right.
There's a lot of research out there, and certainly some folks have come back after serving with some definite issues, and some need more time than others to transition fully. But a lot of times, people have a tendency to walk on eggshells a little bit around that. Hiring is always a risky proposition, and I understand that folks might think that with the wars going on so long that there's a high number of people that may not fit in.
Right.
And I think veterans are very flexible, very agile folks.
Yep.
Who have done amazing things under amazing circumstances.
The stress and conditions that many of them have faced make the stress of the business world look like a joke. I mean, insignificant by comparison.
Yeah, it really does. And honestly, for most folks, even that do have some traumatic stress, they're very manageable. And so, just like you would with any population of folks, whether it be new parents.
Yep.
or veterans or whatever, if you spend the time to understand a little bit more about them personally and what they're going through, there's usually some pretty easy solves out there. So that doesn't mean that you shouldn't weed out people who just aren't a good fit for your company and your culture.
Right.
But I wouldn't worry too much. I wouldn't go in there thinking that you have a calling to have to weed people out because of what they've been through.
Got it. So overall, it's a great untapped source. There's just no question about it.
Basically untapped source of talent. But just like any other type of diverse talent, you have to approach it a certain way. We get really comfortable with hiring people who have done the same exact thing at a competitor.
Sure.
That just-in-time, ready-made talent. Corporations have gotten really used to being able to do that. And so these transition programs of people from other industries or people that have, different experiences than exactly what your company does.
Yep.
Much like veterans, if you build the right programs that are open-minded to the greatness that those folks bring, and you focus on their strengths as opposed to focusing on all the reasons why they might fail in a job.
Right.
If you have that type of culture and you welcome people that way, you'll find lots of different type of talent that is amazing and unexpected even.
We're looking for analogies of the type of things that they've had to do in comparable situations, which, like we said, could have been much more severe. But I think one of the challenges that I'd love for you to shed some light on is, how do you assess the background of a veteran who may not have a lot of corporate or company experience, right? Especially if I've never served in the military, how do I get my arms around and say this is analogous or this is not analogous to a company experience?
Well, I think there are some easy one-for-ones, right? If you are a trucking company and you're looking for truck drivers, there are truck drivers in the military.
Sure, that's a one-for-one type of thing.
Right.
Yep.
But people have a tendency to think that all military people are frontline warfighters, and the majority of the military actually are enabling functions. And so there's human resources, there's accounting, there's payroll, there's program management. There are things that actually do correlate pretty one-for-one.
Yep.
But honestly, Jeff, I've been doing this a long time, and I could use myself as an example. I was a Cobra pilot, and I didn't even know what human resources was
Right.
when I was in the military. As a military officer or military leader, a non-commissioned officer, a warrant officer, look, you're in charge of millions of dollars of stuff. You're in charge of many times hundreds of people. Certainly, even at a junior military officer or leader level, you're in charge of 20, 30 people right off the bat
Yep.
in most circumstances. And so, there's a lot of the intangibles that translate, and I think you could assess those intangibles the same way you would assess them even in people that come from your industry. Things around leadership, things around dependability, agile, and flexibility, the situational awareness that people build in the military.
You're looking for the competencies that led to success in that role, and mapping it to the competencies required for success in this role. While they may have been very different situations, those competencies may be an exact match.
The examples that they give will be a little different. But look, I mean, one of the great benefits that people will realize in hiring veterans, number one, it's the most diverse talent population you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
From a customer perspective or from a organizational and talent perspective,
yep.
It's very diverse. So you have people that get outside of their comfort zone very quickly.
Yep.
It is an organization that is built around teamwork and operating in teams, and in most businesses these days, and most teams.
Very team driven, sure.
That's how we deliver. They have a strong mission focus, and when they don't have clarity, they have the courage to ask, what are we really doing? And when you deal with life and death on a daily basis, those things kind of matter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So, and that's one of the things you actually have to watch for when you're hiring veterans, because in my mind, there's not a bigger mission than freedom.
Sure.
Than helping those who want to fight for freedom get it. And so sometimes the tasks, the daily task of normal business operations, if you aren't clear with them on why it's important, and you're not answering the questions that they have on why it's important,
right?
Just like anybody.
So Jen, and I know we're speaking globally, and there are exceptions, but what I hear you saying, Chris, is vets tend to be mission driven, which means that you need, as the executive, the hiring manager, you need to find that connection between their day-to-day work and the company's mission. That's an important characteristic to these folks.
Most definitely, because otherwise, it's not that they won't take a job, because everybody needs one. But that isn't any different than managing Generation Z or
sure.
millennials and else.
They're not going to be engaged, right?
Right.
Got it. You brought up an interesting point earlier, PTSD, which is tragic and common, but I think to your point, not as common as everyone assumes. How does one get their arms around whether legally, ethically, morally, there are issues that would prevent the person from being successful in the workplace that may not be obvious during an interview? Do you bring it up? What are the legal bounds? Just give us a mini lesson, if you will. Or is it so infrequent that it's not even worth, it's just statistically not even worth worrying about?
Well, I'm going to speak from working for organizations that have the resources, the employee resource programs or EAPs, employee assistance programs, or just we hire enough people that we see enough things that we're generally prepared for any employee issue, whether it's a veteran or not. But I do think you get focused on what's important. What are the predictors of success in the job? You could ask for experiences, even though they may not be specific work experiences, but you could dig into, how people operate under pressure, or things that are important to them, to understand their true motivators, and have the surrounding support in the infrastructure. Coaching managers that, just because somebody's in a bad mood doesn't mean that they have PTSD.
Right.
And so building awareness, number one, not jumping to conclusions, number two, but also knowing that we all bring stuff to work every single day based upon life experience.
Many people have PTSD that never served in the military.
That's true.
And you don't see that in an interview.
That's right. And honestly, it's more prevalent in our society because of how good life is.
Sure.
And so it's something that's definitely manageable in most circumstances. But you could see, just as you would with other folks who may not be great culture fits. If you have a structured interview process, you know what's important. You could ask questions and get the data that you need. You're going to limit 99% of the issues.
Sure. Got it. You brought up another aspect which is interesting, which is how mission-driven veterans often are, which is obviously something the country benefits from. What about employers who might be hesitant about creativity? In other words, they're looking for someone that thinks outside the box, doesn't need to be provided with specific instructions. I think there's a myth there, but how do you untangle that one?
Well, I think you just uncovered a myth that may not have been a myth 30 years ago when we were building a military that was going to fight a conventional war, head to head with the Russians. Today's military is a lot different.
Yeah.
And I started seeing a lot of the change in leadership development programs and tactics and everything else while I was still on active duty, and certainly saw that transform while I was in the reserves. But today's military is much different. I mean, they're operating in tribes and small squads, and they have complete autonomy.
Yep.
They say that the best laid plans fly out the door as soon as the first bullet's fired.
Yep.
And especially with the type of warfare that we've been fighting, folks, and again, you can't say all people in the military or all people outside of the military, but this is a sample of a population that is across the United States that we put in these situations, and so you're going to find people who are very creative. You're going to find people who just want to take orders. You're going to find people who don't follow any orders like me.
Right. At least they're honest about it.
I followed orders. I was just able to understand the gray of the order a
right.
little bit more. So there's never a simple answer that says all military people are great with situational awareness or under stress, or they come up with creative solutions in times of where people wouldn't normally expect them to. But it is a much different military than it was 30 years ago,
right.
I'll tell you that.
Right. What about veterans who, I guess you'd call them long-term veterans? They were in the military for a sustained period of time. Maybe not a kid who had 3-4 years experience, but 20 years experience, 30, and they're coming out. It strikes me that's going to be potentially a rough transition to the corporate world, right? How do you prepare for that? Is that a risk that you should take? Should small companies say, you know what, we just don't have the time and resource to provide that kind of ramp-up time and leave it to larger companies? How do you kind of think about that?
I do think that, so I've seen, and a lot of my friends, I went to my 25th West Point reunion last year, so a very small number of my classmates are actually still in. Most of them have achieved general rank now.
Yep.
So I've seen over the last 5 years a lot of my friends transition out after 20 years. And they're all exceptional people doing very well. West Pointers are, and really all leaders of both the enlisted leadership. If you've made it that long in the military,
you have something to offer, right?
You've gone through significant leadership development training. You've gone through lots of experiences that should give you the flexibility. So as long as somebody wants to do the job, and you're willing to help them understand the things that they might, the industry-specific things that they may not have encountered, there's a high degree of probability that those folks are going to fit in just nicely.
Have you seen a type of role, because you've seen your friends, your colleagues, but more importantly, many, many candidates over the years, types of roles that seem to work really well as an entry point after a long-term service?
Remember, and this goes back to, especially as folks get higher in rank where they're focusing on more strategic things and they're doing things that are a little bit more closely aligned with the business world. So they're leading very large operations. You've seen a lot of people go into Amazon, for example.
Yeah. Logistics, operations.
Logistics and operations. Many times it's a natural fit. I have just as many friends that have either tried to start companies, in the process of starting companies, have gone into Silicon Valley and done extremely well. Sometimes there's a transition. I mean, I look at my own experience. I came out of combat arms, and even though I grew up in New Orleans and was pretty laissez-faire, I could turn on the discipline when I needed to.
Yeah.
And I had my op tempo was much different when I got out of the military than after being out of the military.
Right.
For more than 20 years now. But what I recognized was I ended up in an industry, the semiconductor industry, that was very process and operationally driven, and that happened to be, just dumb luck, a great transition for me. It would have been much more difficult for me to transition into a free-thinking, culture-driven organization like an Intuit or a 10X.
Yep.
Even though we have operational components here at 10X too, and actually lots of veterans, it would have been harder for me, and it would have been a little bit more of a foreign world. But again, that was 20 years ago.
Sure.
The military was a lot different 20 years ago. So I do think that you have to be cognizant of it, and you have to make sure that you're building the environment where you understand that there is an element of transition, and that you're going to be ready for them, and so they can be ready for you. And a lot of times, things like the employee resource groups or affinity groups, where people can connect quickly with other ex-military folks or loved ones. But Jeff, in the end, I started the affinity group at Intuit, the Intuit Military Network.
Yep.
And we got up to over 300 people, and we studied our membership. There was nobody in that group doing what they did in the military, and we're talking about general counsels and
right,
talent.
Totally different kind of roles.
Right, but what did translate are the leadership experiences and dealing with tough situations and stress. And
I've had a lot of success with sales professionals and sales executives. I don't know. I think it's a combination of things: discipline, the focus on building a pipeline, the ability to be responsive to a prospective customer who's kind of all over the place, and had a lot of success there. So I think, to your point, operations, logistics, sales, there's quite a few areas that can make great entry points. In the couple minutes we have remaining, Chris, what's the one thing that I should do if I'm running a 20, 30, 40 person company and we don't have any vets, any military folks, and I decide, you know what, I can't afford to miss this population. What is the first step? Is there a government resource I should focus on tapping into that provides connection to the most candidates? Is it just as simple as hiring my first one and kind of, going from 0 to 1? How do I do it?
Yeah, look, there are government resources and non-governmental resources, and we probably don't have enough time. And the great thing about
there's so many, right?
But that's also part of the problem. And so organizations like the one I partner closely with, Vets in Tech, which tries to create that bridge for veterans who are interested in either technology careers, technology training, or entrepreneurship avenues. There's even a lot of the incubators or hack programs are building programs that are welcoming veterans. There's certainly lots of places to benchmark. The employee resource groups at other companies would be a perfect example there. But there is probably some value and merit to hiring a veteran who has gone through that transition and works for a competitor and can help build that program. And there's certainly both profit and not-for-profit organizations out there.
Yep.
If you're close to a base, you can start getting involved with some of the things in the transition programs in the base. I know I have a lot of friends in the trades, and they actually put Sealand vans with training, to get people ready for that civilian.
Yeah.
There's programs like Skills Bridge, which allows people in the military that are going to get out over the next 6 months to actually go in like an internship into local businesses. There's, we've just recently built an apprenticeship. The way the government is, the Department of Labor is looking at apprenticeships nowadays is a lot more progressive, and there's opportunities there to build apprenticeships that kind of ease people in. But the biggest kind of advice that I would say, we're used to working in buddy teams in the military.
Yep.
And you might benefit by, if you're going to go after one, go after two.
Go after two, right? Just so there's some safety in numbers, if you will, right? They feel like they're part of something. I get it, Chris. This has been great. I think we talked about many of the reasons to do this. I think the point is do it, start. It's a huge source of talent that you can't afford not to tap into. And in many cases, they really have something to prove, right? They want to make a successful transition to the corporate world for the first time. I love motivated people that have something to prove.
Well, and look, here's the other thing, and I've found lots of extremely high-performing people, even in the technology. People don't know how many veterans are in technology.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
The difference is we don't wear our uniforms anymore, and
right.
And generally, most people don't just come out and offer it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of humility built into the veterans population, and
yep.
so, you don't know that you probably have in that 40-person company.
You may even have some. That's a great point too. Maybe that's the first place to start, right?
Why not start there? Exactly.
That's great. Good. Well, Chris, this has been great. How can people learn more about 10X or get in touch with you?
So my email is cgaly@ten-x.com. I'm on LinkedIn under Chris Galy. You can find me on the Vets in Tech website. It's vetsintech.co.
Yep.
Under the advisors page and board members page.
Great.
I'm
You're easy to find.
Easy to find and very passionate about this space and willing to help out in any way I can, whether it's a veteran listening to this or a business leader who's interested in doing more for veterans.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and experience with us, Chris.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks.